Hello friends. In this session, we are going to discuss some of the very specific requirement of case study. Generally, if you look at the case studies or the problem statements of the past few years, last 6-7 years, in the first go, it appears that most of the case studies are almost same. But the demands are very specific and the approach has to be accordingly. When I say approach, does not mean a structure. A structure will more or less remain same. But how do you treat the solutions, or you find the solutions, or you evaluate the solutions or the options, that changes. And because if you look at the way you practice, it's generally what you do, that even if UPSC has not asked for ethical dilemma or ethical issue, you write fact of the case, you write issues in the case, you write dilemma in the case, then you write a stakeholder. In the stakeholder, you write certain things which has no meaning, in the sense by giving arrow, I am SP in this case or XYZ, and then you come to the options. The point which I am trying to raise is, please try to understand the specific requirement. If you are not able to locate the requirement in the problem statement, probably whatever you are writing, you may not get 70-80% of the marks in this section B. Because section B is something where you can go to, you can say 70, 75 or 80 marks out of 120, because this is what the case study is. It's always treated like mathematics, and that's why you will find those who are good in case study always do very good in overall performance, and that's where someone crosses 125, 30 or something even more than that. Now today I want to discuss specifically about the conflict of responsibility. Conflict of responsibility in the sense that what is the specific demand of any case study. Any case study, number one, talks about or wants to test your objective. What is your objective? Do you understand the objective or not? Here the problem is that in many cases you will find that there may be multiple objectives. Means you may have 2-3 objectives. Similarly, the another thing in the case study is problem. How do you understand the problem? Merely on the basis of the legality, morality, or you also consider the various stakeholders, interest, claims, etc. If you do so, then your perspective will change in the sense dealing with the problem and also identifying the problem. Third very important aspect is who you are in this case. Who you are in this case and the role, responsibility, etc. I call it role obligation. You don't have to write these things, but to understand the problem statement. I always say, I believe I'm practicing with the students that instead of practicing more, please try to understand and spare some time to understand the questions. Why cannot be a practice session, or not only practice session, why cannot be a model or a strategy where you are investing certain time to understand the questions, demand of the question, how to locate the specific demand within the question. I repeat, how to locate a specific demand within the question, be it paper 1, paper 4, essay, optional, how does it matter? Questions are questions. And before writing, the first thing first is that in any case you have to locate that what is the key demand. And so is the case here also. Role obligation in the sense that who you are in this case and what is expected from you. And obviously, fourth, I always say most important of all, constraint. Constraint basically helps you. Constraint basically, or your ability to identify constraint within the case, helps you to bring more and more objectivity in your answer. I repeat my sentence. Understanding of constraint in the problem statement helps you to remain objective in answer writing, because you don't deviate, you don't talk anything which is not relevant. It's not about good, bad, right, wrong. It's basically about relevant. Whether your answer is relevant. Relevant simply means meeting the specific requirement. Relevant has simple meaning. Meeting the specific requirement. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So this is all about this. Now, so when you say role obligation, sometimes you will find that there is a conflict of responsibility. Conflict of responsibility. In the sense, in many cases or many problem statements, which I will come up with certain cases, there is something called objective responsibility. Objective responsibility. Again, I am saying you don't have to write all these things, but for the sake of understanding the demand, how to locate the demand or a specific demand in the question, for that sake, I am taking this session. One is objective responsibility, another is subjective responsibility. Now, in any case, you will find that if something is based on law or problem is in and around the law, some of the very popular practices or the norms, then it brings more and more, you can say, the objectivity. But at the same time, you are individual, you have some belief, you have some religious belief, etc. And you may have, you can say, some different understanding or certain opinion because of your conscience that used to play a very important role. And so that conflict of responsibility comes. Take the very, you can say, the real life example. What happened in the Savita Halapanwar case in Ireland when she was pregnant, told by the doctor that you will have to abort because there is a threat to your life. There is a very famous case. Unfortunately, she could not survive. Now the issue is, when doctor knew that she is going to you can say die and there is a threat to her life, but doctor cannot do, because in the Ireland the abortion that time was not permitted because of law also and because of the Catholic Church practices also. Fine. Now here it may be a conflict of responsibility because individuals' conscience may be different in this case than what law says or what religious practices says. Being a doctor, when somebody is treating a patient and it's a clear indication that there is a threat to the life, in that case it may happen that conflict of responsibility. Objective responsibility clearly says the law of the land that you cannot do anything because abortion is not allowed. Being a doctor, I say how I can allow a mother to die, because my conscience doesn't allow this to happen, and there may be a conflict of responsibility, and there can be several cases. So the question is here, and in UPSC also you will find that every year at least, you can say, sometime one question, sometime three questions they ask, which is typically based on the conflict of responsibility. Which talks about the conflict. The case itself is conflict of responsibility. And so when there are conflict of responsibility, to resolve it, you will have to list the obligations. What are the obligations? And out of these obligations, the first and important thing that you will have to identify, what is my primary obligation and why? Because always do remember that within the case, role conflicts are very common. Role conflicts, very common. Very, very common. But the question is, when the role conflict happens, on what basis you go, or you prioritize either the subjective responsibility or objective responsibility, one above the another, on the basis of what? And before that, it's equally important whether you understand that it is a very typical case of conflict of responsibility. For example, let's read this case. Read this case along with me, and then we will discuss how there is a conflict of responsibility. You read this case with me. So what it says, the case goes like this. Ratandeep, an orphan, is a 30-year young man who lives in a small town of Punjab. Ratandeep does not have much for sustenance. He does some part-time work in a real estate company, as he is incapable of holding a full-time job due to a drug habit. He has also served jail for quite some time for possessing drugs which he kept for his own consumption. He never sell it, nor is he involved in any other crime, but community members of his locality do not like him at all. Few senior members of his colony have approached you, as you are the police inspector of that area. Community members have put pressure on you to arrest him, considering him as a threat to the society. Community members also approach the local political leader to do something about it. Since that community is a potential vote bank of the ruling party, so you are quite aware that sooner or later you will get instruction from the political quarter also to do the same. Answer the following questions. Now, allow me to come in now. Now, it's a typical case where you will find that it says that you are police inspector. So the first case is that Ratandeep has some drug habit for quite some time, and it says for his own consumption. That's okay. That's okay. This is another point. Now you see the community members' demand of the community member, because community member for his locality. Forget about the politician, something else. Now, if you look at from the position you have, fine, there is legal obligations, objective responsibility, because what law says that's it. That's it. It's also very important to understand the demand of the community, because it has some bad influence on the community, societies, youth, etc. Whether it is for own consumption or what, doesn't matter. Fine. But at the same time, being inspector or police inspector, it appears that this is a case where law may not bring a big change. Rather, you will have to think for some social action through which you can probably correct the things. Now, in this light, there is a clear-cut conflict of responsibility. Your own conscience, belief, etc. At the same time, you can say the objective responsibility, and that is what law says, very clear-cut, and what is the community's demand. So in this light, you see the question. What question has been framed? The question has been framed like, discuss the dilemma tangled in the case. This dilemma is a typical dilemma of conflict of responsibility. Conflict of responsibility. Dilemma happens because of the conflict of values. Dilemma happen because conflict of responsibilities. Fine. There is a difference between confusion and dilemma. It's not a case of confusion. It's a basically clear-cut case of dilemma. And dilemma is because of you can say the conflict of responsibilities. Otherwise, if you just think that will follow blindly what is the case, sorry, what law says, I will go with the law. It's illegal, it's illegal. It's illegal, that's it. So if you think like this, then the whole answer will be based on the legal initiatives, and then you will justify why. Why? Again, I am saying you, conflict of responsibility, whenever the case of conflict of responsibility comes to you, you will have to take one decision, and that is, what is the primary obligation? What is the primary obligation? Now, in case of law versus some other things, can some other things go above the law? Above the law. Now, in this case, law is not only about the punishment. Law is about the reform. Law is also about preventing from doing a crime. So it's also, you can say, law also guides to take certain social action, probably which may bring a sustainable solution rather than simply filing an FIR or book someone. The point which I am trying to raise, whenever you put this primary obligation, then you will have to justify why. And if your why fails, then you are likely to get punished for that. You cannot allow your why to fail. Why means you will have to substantiate why you are saying something as a primary obligation in the case of conflict of responsibility. Fine. So this is what this case is all about. Otherwise, ethical, you can say strict action against him. This is a different case altogether. But the point which I am trying to say here is that basically the demand of the community is right at their own place. But when you say course of action, this course of action demands that first you settle your conflict of responsibility first. So conflict of responsibility by settling here simply means that not to break the law, rather talk to the community members that how it is responsibility of the community members equally that to bring reform in the society, that to help someone to come out of the menace or the mess of the life. And then you will help Ratandeep to you can say to come out of their habit through taking various actions, either rehabilitation or some skilling things or various things, that all depends upon you. But you have to deal with two things at the same time: demand of the community and then bringing Ratandeep out of the mess of the life. Now both the things has nothing to do with the law, because law may not say that what do, what not to do. Law is black and white. But then you know in which case you can avoid or you can bend the law. You cannot break the law. In which type of cases where you cannot play with the law, what law says, it says. But there are cases which I am trying to show you where you may face various conflicts, out of which you will have to prioritize certain things. This is what I want to explain to you. There is no rule sort of thing. So if you are expecting certain rule sort of thing, it is not going to happen. It depends upon case to case. It depends upon case to case. For example, read this question with me. Fine. Read it. What it says, that there is a senior police officer whose only daughter is going to be married. The police officer is very honest and upright and does not want to enter into any controversy, especially on the occasion of his daughter's marriage. On the wedding day, the officer noticed that a notorious politician cum criminal has come to the officer's residence uninvited. Before the police officer could spot him, he stood up and said that he had just come to bless his daughter. Under this situation, the police officer in a fix as what to do. Now, allow me to come in. Fine. So what it says that there is a senior whose only daughter is going to get married. Police officer is very honest and upright, does not want to enter into any controversy, especially on the occasion of daughter's marriage. On the wedding days, the officer noticed that the notorious politician come criminal. See, has come to the officer uninvited, and he wants to bless your daughter. You are in a fix. In a fix. Now, this is also a case where probably law may not be of much help to you, even if you are a police officer. Fine. It is clearly a conflict inside you, whether to give importance to your image as a police officer, and there is sufficient reason to do so, and also than to be virtuous and treat this notorious politician as a guest. There are two different aspects into this case. And so it is also a kind of conflict of responsibilities, where it's not law versus social action or anything else. Rather, it's basically inside you. Because you are an honest officer, and by giving your life, you have earned the reputation. And these kind of things may give a message to your community, to your fraternity, to your colleagues, that, see, on this occasion or a special occasion, you have invited such a notorious criminal. You cannot give clarification to everyone, and nobody will believe that it's uninvited. Now, in this case also, it's very important that you will have to think for the options in such a way that helps you to, you can say, set certain things as a primary obligation. As far as options are concerned, there may be certain options like I have created for you. For example, police officer should politely ask a narrator to leave the place. Number one, where you are giving priority to your own image. And he should call his daughter and allow politician to bless her, and thereafter tell him to go. Fine. This is also a kind of option. He should not take notice of the presence of the politician, in the sense ignore and don't want to do any ruckus sort of thing on that occasion. Depute some you can say policeman to keep an eye on him and brief him regularly about what he is doing, or he must have some bad intention, because why a politician or notorious criminal will come uninvited. So keep an eye on him. Now the point is here, even after going 4 or 5 options or 3 options, when you go for the conclusion, you will have to pick one out of these 3 or 4. It's possible that UPSC gives you option. It's possible that UPSC simply asks you that what you will do. What are the options before you? So even when UPSC asks what are the options before you, then you will have to you can say write down all the possible or the effective options or the choices you have. Even if you clearly you are able to see that certain things I am not going to do, but then you will have to do, because there is a conflict of responsibility, and let it come to the paper. Once you capture these kind of options, then in the conclusion, then you have to settle the conflict of responsibility. That in this case, it's conflict of responsibility, and I will go with that. Go with one or another. Let me see. Let me bring another case, which is very, very complicated. What I did, that I have combined uh, two, you can say, cases into it. Fine. Read this case. What I did, that I created two different scenarios, which brings more, you can say, a kind of complicated alternatives or choices before you. Right? Just to help you to understand that if this kind of complicated question comes to you, then how to deal with it. So read the question. What it says. It clearly says you are a superintendent of police and a huge protest is going on in front of your office. These protesters are human rights activists. The protest is because of two consecutive incidents that happened in your district. Case 1, the city SP has received intelligence that bombs have been planted in the various places in the city. The SP asked his team to conduct a massive search operation. After putting in the strenuous hard work, the police team raided a house where two people with 2 kg of explosive and IED device were found. The police team immediately arrested him and brought them to the police station. Police started interrogating them about the whereabouts of the bombs and their plans. When they failed to get any information from them, one of the police officers adopted the 3rd degree torture. In the case of new criminals often work, but one of them died during the process as he failed to bear the pain of the torture. Death in the police custody become a big issue. This is scenario number one case. But at the same time, there are 2 cases. In the one question, there are 2 scenarios. Read the second case. What second case says? That recently communal riot occurred in your area and a few police constables got surrounded by a group. Viewing the grave situation and a possible threat to life, one of them used a man as a human shield. They found it to be easy way to escape. It could also save the life of the other police constable, but while they were trying to escape, people started stone pelting, and the person who was used as a human shield got badly injured. However, he was saved later by the proper treatment. Fine. In both the cases, you will find using someone as a human shield goes against his human right. And in the first case, you will find that because of the torture, one criminal died. Whether he was a criminal or not, it's not very sure in the case. And in the given scenario, there are certain questions. The first question is, now in this case, if you look at the case, it's a very, very typical case of ethical dilemma. Both the scenarios, there is a very clear-cut case of ethical dilemma. Now, whenever these kind of ethical dilemma happens, now the question is, number 1, why you call it dilemma? And number 2, how you settle the things. So look at the case. Analyze the ethical dilemma you will face as a SP in both the cases, as there is, you can say, the protest in front of your office by certain activists, and in any case, if someone died in the police custody, it becomes a very big legal issue also. So in this case, you will face the dilemma. Yes, of course, yes. Why? The question is why? Why? What kind of ethical dilemma in this case? Because what happened is illegal. Death in the torture. But at the same time, it's very clear cut that it was not intended. Principle of permissible harm clearly says that collateral damage of any action to prevent the bigger harm may be justified if the intent is to you can say the prevent the bigger harm. If the intent is to prevent the bigger harm, and that's why you will find. But at the another side, you will find if something is illegal, it's illegal, and so you will find at the SP being SP, your conscience and also as a team leader, you know that the intent was not to cause the damage to one any individual, but at the same time you also know that whatever has done, it has some legal implications or the legal views also. So what happens that you will have to capture first, and then you have to go for the primary obligations. This is how you settle the ethical dilemma, and this is how you should write. When you write that law versus morality, no, not at all, don't write versus sort of thing. Rather, please make a sentence which is complete in itself. Why I say complete in itself? Because you have to demonstrate to the examiner that you are able to understand what kind of values are in conflict. Also, when you write, there are 4 or 5 points in the dilemma. This dilemma, it never happens like this. It never happens like this, that there are 5, you can say, the value conflicts or something like that. No, please. Be objective. Be objective here. That in this case, that the law and my individual conscience as a team leader is in conflict, because I personally know, or it's clearly visible in the case that the intent was not to damage or kill someone. Rather, it was to protect the bigger harm, but unfortunately, something happened which is illegal. Whether your intent is good or bad, but if a death in the custody happens, then it's illegal. Now, so this is how you will make a complete sentence or paragraph, a small brief paragraph, which gives a sense to the examiner that you understand why you call something or some situation as a, you can say the dilemma, ethical dilemma, where that conflict you find in my role, in my belief, in certain values. Where do you find that conflict, and are you able to bring in the paper with a great amount of clarity or not? Right? So this is what. Second says, question says, human rights activists are demanding action against the officer involved in both the cases. What will your course of action? Yes, of course, yes. In the sense that you will listen to them, and then also you will convey what is going to be your course of action. So course of action will be, you will constitute a committee or a fact finding, or you will you can say depute a fact finding team to find the fact of the case. The message has to be very clear that law will take its own course, and then you are at the side of the law. You are at the side of the law. Number 3, police chief of the state reaches you and asks not to take any action as it would bring down the morals of the police. See, again, conflict of responsibility. Conflict of responsibility, because clearly one senior says that don't do it because it is not intentional, and if you do anything, it will bring the moral of the police force. Because in both the conditions, situation were very tough. Very tough, very tough, very urgent, very demanding, and because of which the police officers took that kind of harsh action. Again, there is a conflict of responsibility, that your individual as you can say as a subordinate also. Fine. Can you justify the use of torture? Give the circumstances. Principle of permissible harm. Torture is illegal. Torture is illegal. Law doesn't permit. But the question is, when there was a big threat, to get the information and to prevent the bigger harm, what option you have? So so you will write here that the intent is not to, you can say, kill someone, but basically to prevent the bigger harm and to get the information to do so. So here you will write, it's not about justifying and not to justify. Here about that in this context, how you explain the case, that whatever happened. And then it comes human seal. Almost it is also demanding the same kind of thing. Now, let's come to the point. When I started by saying that please try to understand 4 things in the case. So sometimes there may be 2, 3, 4 objectives before you. You will have to know how to prioritize it. It's also about that there may be conflict of responsibility. Then also you will have to understand what is the primary obligation. This is how you settle dilemma. This is how you solve these conflicts. Fine. So this is what the intent is basically of this session, to help you to understand that when these kind of things happens, just remember one thing, that primary obligation, and then to bring why into it. Why you consider it a primary obligation, and then comes how you will settle it. How you will settle it. So that kind of clarity in the explanation is important. And every year you will find at least 2 to 3 questions are typically designed, which is going to test you whether you understand the conflict of responsibility or not, which we also face in you can say in the normal life, not in daily, but we face sometime, and then you know better how to settle it. Fine. So this is all about today's session. Thank you.